Hi, and welcome to this presentation on tics and Tourette's syndrome. Now, you may be wondering why you are watching this presentation. Well, it's likely that you have someone in your school, class, or club with tics or Tourette's. Having tics is really common. Put your hands up if you know someone with autism. Now, put your hands up if you know someone with Tourette's syndrome. It's likely that there were more raised hands for autism, despite it being felt that there is as many people with autism as there is Tourette's syndrome. So what is a tic? A tic is a sudden, rapid, reoccurring, non-rhythmic movement or vocalization. Tics can be simple, like a blink or sniff, or they can be complex, like a full facial grimace or sentence. Where do tics come from? This is the complicated bit. Tics are closely linked to genetics, so someone in their family is likely to have tics or some form of neurodiversity. It's a condition within the brain, specifically the basal ganglia, and it is believed that those with tics have too much of a chemical called dopamine. I like to describe it like this. The basal ganglia is the brain brakes, and the dopamine is the oil within the brakes. Too much oil means we sometimes struggle to put the brakes on, and that's when the tics slip out. Now, there are different types of tic disorders. Just because you have tics does not mean you have Tourette's syndrome. As I said at the beginning, tics are really common. In fact, 18% of children under the age of 10 experience tics at some point. These only last a short period of time, usually when the child is stressed, so maybe starting a new school or moving house, for example. This is called a provisional or transient tic disorder. Some people have tics for longer. If you have had only motor or vocal tics, but not both, for more than a year, this would be called a persistent or chronic tic disorder. It's only when you have both motor and vocal tics for more than a year that you are seen as having Tourette's syndrome. There are hundreds of different tics, but some common tics may be this: blinking, eye rolling, shoulder shrugging, touching things, jumping, jerking the head and limbs, grunting, throat clearing, coughing, repeating words and phrases, and basically any sound that comes out of your mouth. There are also some less common tics. These may be throwing things, ripping up paper, calling out in or out of context, contextual tics, snapping things, blocking, smashing things, banging self, others, or objects, hitting self or others, spitting, or part of the copro family. So the copro family is where things are said, written, thought, or actioned that are inappropriate. It's important to remember that if a person with tics says rude, unkind, or inappropriate comments, that they did not mean it, and they will be feeling sad that they may have upset you with their tics. It's also possible to have mental tics. These are when you have a flash thought, image, word, or phrase within the mind. You may also have visual tics, and this is when you do things with your eyes, like look at things in a particular way. It's also possible to have conversational or contextual tics, and this is where they look very much like they are associated with the conversation or stimulus around them. People with Tourette's are often thought to swear, but this isn't true. Yes, some people with tics do have swearing tics, but only a very small percentage of them. Those with Tourette's may also have other conditions that can make life a little tricky. If you know someone with Tourette's already and then meet someone else with Tourette's, it's very unlikely that they will present in the same way. This is because Tourette's is a spectrum, meaning that everyone has different tics and co-occurring conditions. It's really important to know that not all tics can be seen. So just because you don't see them tick all the time, it doesn't mean that they are not ticking. Some invisible tics may be mental, visual, or even muscle tensing. It's really important to know that tics change. It's like they are on a roller coaster. They can go up or down, and they can even get really bad for a short period of time and then reduce again. This is normal for tics and does not mean that the person is putting them on. So can you stop tics? In theory, yes, tics can be held in for a short period of time. In fact, some people can even change their tics to make them less noticeable. However, a person with tics should never be asked to hold them in, stop, or be quiet. Tics are involuntary, so they are mostly out of the person's control. A premonitory urge is a funny feeling that most people with tics experience just before their tic happens. This feeling isn't a nice feeling and can make people feel irritated and upset. The feeling of a premonitory urge increases if the person doesn't do the tic. So if they are holding their tics in, it is likely they are in lots of discomfort. Let's explore how that might feel. Find somewhere in the room you are in and stare at it. No blinking. Hold it until you can feel a horrible burning sensation within your eyes. Now you've experienced that burn and maybe some watering, you can understand a little bit of what it's like to experience a premonitory urge, and this is why it's so important to never ask someone to be quiet or to stop ticking. Tics are suggestible. This means they are often triggered by talking and thinking about them. It also means if they see someone else ticking or mimicking a tic, it could bring them on. The easiest way to explain this is to think about yawning. If you turn and look to somebody next to you and one of you yawn, it's likely that the second person will begin to yawn shortly after. As I mentioned earlier, those with tics often have other conditions too. In fact, it's said that tics are just the tip of the iceberg. The most common co-occurring conditions associated with Tourette's are ADHD, OCD, anxiety, dysgraphia, disinhibition, and sleep issues. Alongside normal anxiety, there is such a thing as an anxiety tic cycle. This is where the person may have a few tics. They then become anxious that someone will notice. Due to this anxiety, they tic more. This then increases the anxiety again, and you guessed it, the tics can intensify more. When someone with tics knows that the people around them are educated on tics, they are less likely to experience this tic cycle. Despite tics being down to a misfire within the brain, they are also very much controlled by the environment. This means different lessons, teachers, peer groups, lights and sounds can all have an impact on someone's tics. It's even possible for tics to be completely different in one lesson to the next. Having tics can be really difficult, especially when others often look and stare. This can make the person with tics feel lonely and sad. It's usually okay to ask someone about their tics as long as you check first and also make sure you are always kind. It's never okay to point, stare, copy or mimic someone's tics. It's really important to be supportive and understanding to those with tics, as tics are out of the person's control. Some ways to do this are to not stare or point out their tics. Be kind and patient. Make sure you don't laugh at them and always include them. Remember to only ask questions if you have checked if they are happy to talk about them. I hope you found this helpful and now feel like you can be supportive to anyone you meet with tics, and I really hope you enjoy the rest of your day.